Margaret Collins had always been the type of person who lived quietly. Her life was simple, calm, and predictable, and she liked it that way. At 60, she had learned to enjoy the small things, the soft morning light streaming through her kitchen window, the aroma of fresh coffee, the sound of birds chirping in her garden. Every corner of her home reflected a sense of peace and order. From the neatly stacked books on her shelves to the carefully arranged flowers in a small vase by her living room window, she liked knowing exactly what her day would look like, minute by minute. It made her feel safe. It made her feel in control. Across the street lived Henry Walker, a man of her own age whose life mirrored hers in many ways. He was widowed, like many in their small town in Vermont, and he spent most of his days quietly tending to his garden or walking through the neighborhood, greeting everyone he met with a kind smile. His hair had turned silver over the years, and the lines on his face carried the weight of experiences he seldom spoke about. People often said he had a gentle soul, the kind of person who made others feel comfortable just by being present. Margaret had noticed him years ago, but never thought much of it beyond casual acknowledgement. After all, at their age, romance seemed like something that belonged to the young, to people with fire in their hearts and no pasts weighing them down. Yet, over time, Margaret realized that Henry's presence was different. He was quiet but noticeable, the sort of person who lingered in your mind without even trying. Their interactions were always polite, brief exchanges at first, a wave from the sidewalk, a friendly hello when they met at the local grocery store, or a nod as they passed each other during morning walks. But there was an unspoken connection, something that went beyond words. Every time Henry smiled at her, it was as if he acknowledged a part of her that no one else did. Every time Margaret noticed the way he paused to watch a bird or adjust a flower in his garden, she felt an inexplicable warmth inside her chest, something she had not felt in years. Margaret often found herself thinking about Henry in moments she never expected. She would see him helping a neighbor carry groceries or laughing softly to himself in his front yard and wonder what it would be like to talk to him about things that mattered. She imagined conversations about books they both liked, about music they remembered from their youth, about memories that were both happy and bittersweet. Yet, despite these thoughts, she never allowed herself to act on them. She had built her life around routines and comfort. And letting someone new in someone with history, with feelings, with the capacity to hurt her felt risky. Still, fate seemed to have its own plans. Over the years, small gestures became more frequent. Henry began leaving freshly baked bread at her doorstep with a small note that read, "For you, thinking of you." At first, Margaret thought it was merely kindness, a neighborly gesture. But soon she realized that it was more than that. It was a form of communication, subtle but deliberate. And she felt a strange mixture of surprise, joy, and fear every time she received it. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but she could not deny that she looked forward to it. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret decided to take a walk in her neighborhood. The leaves were bright shades of red, orange, and yellow, crunching underfoot as she walked. Henry appeared as if on cue, tending to his garden. He looked up, saw her, and waved. Margaret waved back, and for a moment they both smiled. Neither said a word, but in that silent exchange there was an entire conversation of acknowledgement and understanding. Margaret knew. She was growing restless with the predictability of her days. Her life was comfortable, yes, but it was also quiet in a way that sometimes made her feel invisible, like she was drifting through the world without leaving a mark. Seeing Henry, noticing his quiet attentions, made her feel alive in a way she had not felt for decades. She felt a strange excitement, a flutter of anticipation whenever she knew she would see him. The small town they lived in had its rhythm. People knew each other and gossip spread like wildfire, though Margaret rarely cared about it. What mattered to her was the authenticity of the moments she shared with Henry, brief as they were. She often found herself replaying them in her mind. The way he laughed when a bird landed too close to his flower bed. The way he carefully adjusted a plant as if it were delicate and precious. The way he sometimes looked at her when she least expected it, as if he were seeing her in a way no one else could. Over time, Margaret began to notice changes in herself. She felt a renewed sense of energy in her daily routines. She found joy in small things that she had long ignored. The smell of rain on the pavement, the sound of a neighbor's dog barking in the distance, the way sunlight filtered through her curtains in the morning. But mostly, she felt a quiet anticipation. She began to wonder if Henry felt the same way, or if it was merely her imagination. Their encounters slowly became longer. A brief conversation at the mailbox would turn into 15 minutes of talking about books, the weather, or memories of their youth. Margaret began to notice how Henry listened, really listened, as if every word she spoke mattered. She found herself sharing thoughts and memories she had never told anyone. And Henry responded with empathy, kindness, and gentle humor. It was as if a bridge was being built between them, strong yet delicate, capable of holding the weight of years they had both carried alone. One evening, Margaret sat by her window, looking across the street at Henry tending his garden. The sky was painted with the soft hues of sunset, and the air smelled of autumn leaves and wood smoke. She realized she had been thinking about him all day, wondering what it would be like to sit with him, to talk without pretense, to share something real. Her heart beat a little faster at the thought, and she found herself smiling, almost embarrassed by the intensity of her feelings. She had not expected this. She had not expected her life at 60 to feel this way. Margaret knew she had two choices. She could continue to live in the safety of routine, ignoring the fluttering emotions and the subtle pull toward Henry. Or she could take a risk, allow herself to feel, and see where this connection might lead. It was a choice that terrified her. At 60, she had learned that life was short and that every choice carried weight. But she also realized that it was never too late to let someone in, to let love in, to feel alive again. The next morning, Margaret prepared tea and arranged a small plate of biscuits. She knew Henry would come over soon. It was a small invitation, a seemingly ordinary gesture, but to her it felt monumental. She was opening a door she had long kept closed, unsure of what might be waiting on the other side. The anticipation was almost unbearable. She wanted to run, to hide, to retreat into the comfort of her quiet life. But she also wanted to see what could happen if she stepped forward. When Henry arrived, his usual gentle smile was accompanied by a subtle nervousness that Margaret had not noticed before. He carried a small bouquet of flowers, simple but thoughtful, and handed them to her with a shy glance. "For you," he said softly. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she accepted them. It was a moment of pure connection, fragile and beautiful. And in that instant, Margaret felt the full weight of her emotions. She realized that this was more than friendship, more than neighborly kindness. Something was shifting, slowly but unmistakably. Between them, they sat together, drinking tea and talking about everyday things. But beneath the surface, there was an unspoken tension, a silent understanding that both of them were feeling something deeper. Margaret caught herself stealing glances at Henry, noticing the way his eyes softened when he spoke, the gentle curve of his smile, the way his hands moved as he held his cup. Henry, in turn, seemed to linger on her words, as if savoring each one, as if her presence alone was a balm he had been seeking for years. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Margaret felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was stepping into unknown territory, but for the first time in a long time, she felt fully present, fully alive. She realized that life had a way of surprising you, even at 60, even when you thought all the excitement had passed. And she knew deep in her heart that whatever happened next with Henry would change everything. Whether it led to heartbreak, joy, or something in between by the time Henry left, Margaret felt a sense of longing she had not experienced in decades. She watched him walk back across the street, bouquet in hand, and wondered what the future might hold. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. The quiet life she had known was no longer enough. Something new was stirring, something that promised excitement, connection, and maybe even love. She did not know what the next chapter would bring, but she knew that she was ready to find out. Margaret sat by her window long after Henry had gone, holding the bouquet close and breathing in the scent of flowers and possibility. She realized that life was still capable of surprises even at 60. That love, patience, and hope could emerge in the most unexpected ways. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of anticipation for the days to come, a sense of curiosity and wonder that made her heart beat a little faster. It was the beginning of something new, fragile but real, and Margaret was ready to embrace it. The rain began softly, tapping against the window like a quiet drumbeat, when Margaret realized that today felt different. She had invited Henry over for tea, casual gesture, something simple and yet a strange tension filled the room. She had spent the morning tidying her home, arranging flowers, and carefully choosing music that was gentle, familiar, and comforting. But despite all her preparation, she could not shake the feeling that this afternoon would change everything. She tried to focus on practical tasks, polishing the teapot, warming the biscuits, setting the cups just so. Yet, with each passing minute, her heart thumped a little faster, betraying her calm exterior. When Henry arrived, he was carrying a small, neatly wrapped package. He smiled a little awkwardly, a flicker of nervousness in his eyes that Margaret had never seen before. Normally, he had been confident, composed, always gentle and kind. But today there was hesitation in his steps, a subtle tremor in the way he held his hands. Margaret felt a jolt of curiosity. Something was different about him. Something was about to happen. They exchanged their usual pleasantries, small talk about the weather, how the town had been lately, but there was a tension, almost electric, threading through the conversation. Margaret noticed the way Henry paused mid-sentence, as if trying to choose his words carefully. He sipped his tea slowly, his eyes darting toward her face, searching, measuring. Margaret felt her own pulse quicken. She had long suspected there was more beneath the surface of their friendship, more than polite smiles and neighborly kindness. But today, she realized she might finally find out. "Margaret," Henry said softly, his voice carrying a weight she had never heard before, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." Margaret froze for a moment, setting her cup down. She did not know what to expect. She had imagined countless scenarios in her mind over the years, quiet moments like this. Long talks about books or memories, but she had never imagined a confession. Her heart fluttered in her chest. Henry took a deep breath, and Margaret saw his fingers tighten around the teacup. I've never stopped believing in love," he began slowly. "Even after everything, even after the years have passed. I believe it can still happen. And I think it happened with you." Margaret's eyes widened. She felt a sharp intake of breath, her hand flying to her mouth. Without thinking, without realizing it, she let out a small, involuntary scream. It was not fear, not exactly, it was shock, surprise. A sudden explosion of emotion that she had kept locked away for decades. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning, and for a moment, she could not speak. Henry froze, his eyes wide, almost pleading. I didn't mean to startle you," he said quickly. I had to tell you. I couldn't keep pretending anymore." Margaret turned her gaze away, overwhelmed by a tide of emotions she had buried long ago. She thought she had spent her life preparing for calm, for quiet, for routine. She thought she had accepted that love, at this age, was something to admire from afar, something to remember from the past. And yet, here it was, staring her in the face, alive, real, undeniable. She felt the years of longing, of quiet anticipation, of unnoticed attraction, all converge in one intense moment. Henry watched her carefully, his own emotions raw and vulnerable. He had spent years protecting himself, believing that love was no longer possible, that the chance for connection had passed. Yet now, speaking these words, he felt exposed and terrified. He had waited for this, hoped for this, and feared that Margaret might not feel the same. He had never wanted to impose, never wanted to disrupt her life. But he could not deny the truth any longer. Margaret's mind raced. She remembered the small gestures, the thoughtful notes, the quiet moments they had shared. Every time he had smiled at her, every time he had lingered in conversation, it had stirred something within her. Something she had tried to ignore. And now, hearing his words aloud, she realized that it was mutual. Her heart ached with a mixture of joy and fear, a cocktail of longing and hope. She took a shaky breath, struggling to find words. Henry, the first. I didn't think I didn't think it could happen at this age. I didn't think I could feel this way again. Her voice trembled, and her hands shook slightly as she folded them in her lap. But I have. I have felt it. Every time you smiled, every time you knocked on my door, every time we talked, T felt it too. Henry's face softened, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over him. He leaned slightly forward, careful, hesitant, as if approaching a fragile treasure. You mean? You feel the same? He asked, almost whispering. Margaret nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, I've been too scared to admit it. I've spent years telling myself that love at 60 is a dream, something for younger people. But I was wrong. It's real. And I want to explore it. For a moment, silence filled the room. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the window pane. But inside, there was a calm, a gentle acknowledgement of shared truth. Margaret and Henry sat facing each other, their emotions raw yet unspoken in their entirety. Words could not fully capture the weight of what had just passed between them. Henry reached out, slowly, as if testing the waters, and took Margaret's hand in his. The contact was electric yet comforting, a lifeline in the storm of their emotions. Margaret felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of connection that she had thought impossible at her age. Every worry, every fear, every carefully constructed wall she had built around herself, melted slightly in the presence of his honesty and vulnerability. They began to talk, slowly at first, sharing memories of their pasts, stories of their youth and moments of loss that had shaped them into the people they were. Margaret spoke of quiet afternoons spent reading, for friendships that had lasted decades, of dreams she had once held and let slip away. Henry shared stories of his late wife, of the garden he had tended for years, and of the loneliness he had carried. Every story, every memory became a thread weaving them closer together as the rain continued to fall outside. Margaret realized that the world had narrowed to this room, to this moment, to the man sitting across from her. She felt a rush of gratitude, of joy, and of fear all at once. She had spent so long guarding her heart, protecting herself from disappointment, from longing, from pain. And yet, here was the possibility of something new, something alive, something beautiful. Henry, too, felt the weight of the moment. He had spent years doubting whether he could love again, whether someone could understand him, whether life could offer him another chance at happiness. But now, sitting with Margaret, hearing her words, feeling the warmth of her hand in his, he realized that it was possible. Love, he understood, was not bound by age or circumstance. It could arrive unexpectedly, quietly, and yet with overwhelming force. Time seemed to stretch and bend. Hours passed without notice. They spoke of small things, books, music, memories, but each topic carried an underlying intensity, a recognition of what had just begun between them. Margaret noticed the way Henry's eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his voice carried unspoken emotion, the way his presence felt like a balm to her long, lonely heart. And Henry noticed the subtle shifts in her expressions, the quickened heartbeat she could not hide, the flicker of hope and excitement in her gaze. At one point, Margaret laughed softly at a story Henry told about his childhood, a story she had never heard before. The sound surprised both of them. It was light, genuine, and unguarded, a sound that had been missing from their lives for far too long. Henry smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. It was a smile that spoke of relief, of joy, of the recognition that this moment, this connection, was real and possible. As the afternoon gave way to evening, Margaret and Henry found themselves sitting closer than before, their conversation slowing, their attention focused entirely on one another. The room felt smaller, cozier, more intimate, though in the most innocent and genuine way. They did not speak of rushing, of commitment, or of forever. Instead, they focused on being present, on feeling. On acknowledging the bond that had grown quietly over the years, Henry finally stood. Reluctantly, knowing he had to leave, Margaret felt a pang of disappointment, a mixture of longing and gratitude. She realized that this was only the beginning, a delicate first step into a chapter neither of them had expected to find. She had spent years imagining this moment, and yet the reality exceeded her wildest hopes. As he prepared to leave, Henry turned to her with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said softly, "for listening, for understanding, for letting me speak the truth." Margaret smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, Henry, thank you for being brave enough to tell me. I was too scared to imagine this, but now I can see what's possible." The rain outside had begun to ease, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air. Margaret watched Henry walk back across the street, feeling a mixture of anticipation and peace. She realized that life had surprises left, even at 60. She had always believed that her best days were behind her. But now she understood that love could arrive quietly, unexpectedly, and completely transform everything. Sitting alone, holding her empty teacup, Margaret felt her heart full in a way it had not been in decades. She felt alive, hopeful, and ready. Margaret watched Henry walk back across the street after their long afternoon together. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft light of the setting sun. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and uncertainty, a fluttering in her chest she hadn't experienced in years. She held her teacup loosely, letting her thoughts drift back to his words, to the warmth in his eyes and the way he had reached for her hand as if testing a fragile truth. It was one of those rare moments in life when everything shifts, and Margaret knew she had crossed an invisible line into something new. The next morning, she woke with a sense of anticipation. Even the smallest tasks seemed brighter. The aroma of her morning coffee felt richer, the sunlight streaming through the curtains warmer. She thought about Henry, about the honesty he had shown, about the connection that had been growing quietly between them for months. And her heart beat faster at the possibility of what was to come. For years she had convinced herself that her life was complete, that her days of romance and deep emotional connection were behind her. Now she realized she had been wrong. Life still had surprises. Even at 60, Margaret and Henry's days began to change subtly. Their encounters, once brief and casual, became longer and more intentional. They would meet for walks in the neighborhood, talking about the small things at first, the weather, the garden, books they enjoyed, but gradually their conversations deepened. Margaret found herself opening up to him in ways she had not with anyone else in decades. She shared memories of her youth, her triumphs and regrets, and he listened with an intensity that made her feel valued, seen, and understood. Henry, in turn, shared his own past, stories of his late wife, of the years he had spent alone and the quiet longing he had carried in his heart. Margaret learned about the moments he had felt most vulnerable, the times when he thought he might never find connection again. She listened, her heart aching at times, laughing at other moments, always aware that every story he told brought them closer. There was no rush, no pressure, only a growing recognition that they had found something rare and precious in each other. One afternoon, as they walked through the park near their homes, the air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves. Margaret noticed the way Henry's eyes softened whenever he looked at her. The gentle curve of his smile, the careful thought in his gestures. She realized that she, too, had begun to notice every detail about him, the way he held himself, the subtle humor in his words, the kindness that radiated in his every action. Their connection was quiet but powerful, a steady flame that refused to be ignored. They began to plan small things together, coffee at the local cafe, sharing books, attending town events, even cooking together. Each shared moment carried a sense of intimacy and trust that neither of them had expected to find at this stage of life. Margaret felt a joy that was new but comforting, a feeling that she had missed for decades. And Henry felt a sense of peace he had not known since before his wife passed, a quiet happiness in the presence of someone who truly understood him. One evening, Margaret prepared a simple dinner, careful to make the table welcoming, with candles flickering softly. Henry arrived with a small smile, carrying a loaf of fresh bread. They ate together, talking about their week, laughing at small jokes, and sharing quiet moments of comfortable silence. Margaret realized that love did not have to be dramatic or overwhelming. It could be gentle, steady, and kind, growing quietly in the spaces between ordinary life. After dinner, they sat by the window, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. Margaret felt a calm warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging and connection she had thought impossible. She reached for Henry's hand and he took it without hesitation. The touch was simple but profound, a reassurance that they were in this together, that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Over the following weeks, their bond grew stronger. They shared morning walks, afternoons reading in each other's company, and evenings filled with conversation and laughter. Margaret found herself anticipating Henry's presence, feeling a flutter of excitement whenever she knew he would be near. Henry, too, cherished every interaction, finding joy in the smallest details. Her smile, the way she hummed while arranging flowers, the thoughtful way she spoke about the books she loved. Their relationship was not without moments of vulnerability. Both had lived long lives filled with experiences, losses, and disappointments. Sometimes, old fears resurfaced, doubts about whether love at their age could truly last. But each time they found reassurance in one another, in the honesty of their feelings, and in the quiet commitment that had begun to form. Margaret realized that love was not about certainty or perfection. It was about presence, understanding, and willingness to take small steps together every day. One rainy afternoon, similar to the day Henry had first confessed his feelings, they found themselves sitting together in Margaret's living room, a soft blanket draped over their laps. The sound of rain tapping against the window created a comforting rhythm, and the room felt cozy and safe. Margaret looked at Henry, noticing the gentle way he sipped his tea, the thoughtfulness in his expression. She realized how much she had come to rely on his presence, how much she valued the quiet comfort of his company. Henry reached out and touched her hand again, his thumb brushing over hers. "Margaret," he said softly, "I never imagined I could feel this way again. I thought my heart had grown quiet for good. But being with you, it's changed everything." Margaret felt a lump in her throat, tears forming in her eyes. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I didn't think I could love like this again. But you've shown me it's possible even now, even at 60. They sat together in silence, letting the words settle between them, a mixture of relief, joy, and hope. Margaret realized that their love did not need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was in the small, consistent moments of care, in the understanding glances, the gentle touch, the shared laughter, and the comfort of knowing they were not alone. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret and Henry continued to explore their connection. They visited local gardens, attended small-town events, and shared long walks, talking about dreams they had abandoned and hopes they still carried. Each day, their trust and affection grew stronger. They learned to balance independence with companionship, recognizing that love at their age did not require losing oneself, but rather sharing life fully, with respect, kindness, and patience. One evening, while watching the sun set over the quiet town, Margaret reflected on how far they had come. She remembered the first moment Henry had confessed his feelings, the shock and surprise that had overtaken her. She remembered the small, tentative steps they had taken since then, the conversations, the shared meals, the quiet walks, and she realized that each step had brought them closer, creating a bond that was steady, resilient, and filled with promise. Henry stood beside her, his arm brushing lightly against hers. He looked out at the horizon, then turned to her with a gentle smile. "Margaret, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that being with you has made me feel alive again. I didn't expect this at 60, but I'm grateful every day for it." Margaret smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I feel the same, Henry. Life is unpredictable, but I'm glad we found each other. It's never too late for happiness, even if it comes quietly, slowly like this." They embraced, a simple hug that carried years of longing, hope, and newfound love. There were no fireworks, no grand declarations, only the steady certainty that they had found something precious in each other. For the first time in decades, both felt completely at home, fully seen, and truly understood. The months that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments. They would wake early to watch the sunrise, drink coffee together, and share stories from their past. They celebrated small victories and supported each other through minor setbacks. Their lives, once quiet and predictable, were now full of warmth, laughter, and shared experiences. Margaret discovered a joy she had not thought possible at this stage in her life, and Henry experienced a sense of connection that had eluded him for years. Margaret often thought about how life had surprised her. She had spent decades believing that love, excitement, and deep emotional connection were for younger people. She had accepted routine and comfort as her destiny. But with Henry, she had learned that love does not follow a timetable. It does not retire. It arrives quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, and it can transform even the calmest, most predictable life into something vibrant and meaningful. One quiet evening, Margaret and Henry sat together by the fireplace, holding hands, watching the flames flicker. The room was warm, the air scented with the faint aroma of tea and fresh flowers. Margaret looked at Henry, her heart full, and realized that this simple, steady, shared life was enough. It was everything she had hoped for and more. Henry smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Margaret," he said softly, "thank you for letting me in. Thank you for trusting me with your heart." Margaret squeezed his hand, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "Thank you for speaking the truth.